It is not the strongest of the species that survives, not the most intelligent that survives. It is the one that is the most adaptable to change. I am not apt to follow blindly the lead of other men. Blushing is the most peculiar and most human of all expressions. The love for all living creatures is the most noble attribute of man. A man who dares to waste 1 hour of time has not discovered the value of life. Man selects only for his own good, nature only for that of the being which she tends. We stopped looking for monsters under our bed when we realized that they were inside us. Intelligence is based on how efficient a species became at doing the things they need to survive. I see no good reasons why the views given in this volume should shock the religious views of anyone. The highest possible stage in moral culture is when we recognize that we ought to control our thoughts. If the misery of the poor be caused not by the laws of nature, but by our institutions, great is our sin. But I am very poorly today and very stupid, and I hate everybody and everything. One lives only to make blunders. The mystery of the beginning of all things is insoluble by us, and I for one must be content to remain an agnostic. An American monkey, after getting drunk on brandy, would never touch it again, and thus is much wiser than most men. Besides love and sympathy, animals exhibit other qualities connected with the social instincts which in us would be called moral. If I had my life to live over again, I would have made a rule to read some poetry and listen to some music at least once every week. One general law, leading to the advancement of all organic beings, namely multiply, vary, let the strongest live and the weakest die. In the long history of humankind and animal kind, too, those who learned to collaborate and improvise most effectively have prevailed. We must, however, acknowledge, as it seems to me, that man with all his noble qualities still bears in his bodily frame the indelible stamp of his lowly origin. We can allow satellites, planets, suns, universe, nay whole systems of universe to be governed by laws, but the smallest insect we wish to be created at once by special act. Nothing is easier than to admit in words the truth of the universal struggle for life, or more difficult at least, I have found it so than constantly to bear this conclusion in mind. Tags: artificial selection, Darwinism, eugenics, natural selection, Planned Parenthood, population control, social Darwinism, sterilization, survival of the fittest, 88 likes. Ignorance more frequently begets confidence than does knowledge. It is those who know little, not those who know much, who so positively assert that this or that problem will never be solved by science. If it could be demonstrated that any complex organ existed, which could not possibly have been formed by numerous, successive, slight modifications, my theory would absolutely break down. But I can find no such case. There is grandeur in this view of life, with its several powers, having been originally breathed into a few forms or into one, and that, whilst this planet has gone cycling on according to the fixed law of gravity, from so simple a beginning endless forms most beautiful and most wonderful have been, and are being, evolved. As man advances in civilization, and small tribes are united into larger communities, the simplest reason would tell each individual that he ought to extend his social instincts and sympathies to all members of the same nation, though personally unknown to him. This point being once reached, there is only an artificial barrier to prevent his sympathies extending to the men of all nations and races. Thus, from the war of nature, from famine and death, the most exalted object which we are capable of conceiving, namely, the production of the higher animals, directly follows. There is grandeur in this view of life, with its several powers, having been originally breathed into a few forms or into one, and that, whilst this planet has gone cycling on according to the fixed law of gravity, from so simple a beginning endless forms most beautiful and most wonderful have been, and are being, evolved. but I was very unwilling to give up my belief. Thus disbelief crept over me at a very slow rate, but was at last complete. The rate was so slow that I felt no distress, and have never since doubted even for a single second that my conclusion was correct. I can indeed hardly see how anyone ought to wish Christianity to be true. For if so, the plain language of the text seems to show that the men who do not believe, and this would include my father, brother, and almost all of my friends, will be everlastingly punished.